Now, as I mentioned at the top of the show, turning 80 is normally a pretty big deal, and so it should be, but it's been a low-key affair for President Joe Biden, who's become the oldest serving president of the United States. He already was, of course, but now he's the first one to turn 80 in office. The president's wife, Jill, shared a happy family snap on social media, writing a perfect birthday celebration filled with so much love and Joe's favourite coconut cake. No mention of the actual milestone number. As I showed you earlier, Democrats, though, are still maintaining the facade, trying to pretend that Biden will be fit enough to go around again a second term, leading the campaign in the 2024 election. Biden's chances of running then are somewhere between zip and nout. Let's get an expert opinion. I want to bring in Psychiatrist Dr Tanveer Ahmed. Good to talk to you again, Tanveer.
G'day, Chris.
When we're talking about somebody's capacity and early onset dementia, which some medicos have talked about with Joe Biden, I suppose as a medico, you can make reasonable assessments from afar. It's not a perfect diagnosis, but you can see the habits, the speech patterns, and how he's performing. What's your assessment of how Joe Biden is performing?
So look at the tensions between, does he have lots of gaffes, which are more a normal part of his ageing, and that's a possibility, or is it early onset dementia? Now, one of his keys is word finding. He really struggled to finding words. He often doesn't recognise people, gives the wrong names. So gaffes and not recognising names is a very common part. And you see how rehearsed and, his aides go to a lot of lengths to make sure he doesn't have to do anything spontaneously. To some extent, he's got a whole set of resources that can cover his decline. He's a pretty high risk, and I'll tell you why he's a high risk, Chris. One, he's had 2 brain aneurysms in the past. 2, he's got a heart rhythm disorder called atrial fibrillation. So he's a high risk of what's called vascular dementia. Essentially, the blood flow doesn't go quite as well in parts of the brain, and you can get a slow but steady dementia. Now, the positives in his favour are he's got very good family support. He is very active. He's obviously going to get the very best medical care. But look, I think that it's not unreasonable to suggest that he's in the early stages of dementia.
I'll just show some examples here because it's not unreasonable to suggest he's having a lot of problems.
Doing it for the first time now in the 21st century, going into the 20th, from the 20th century going into the second quarter of the 21st century.
The best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to. Anyway, America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to I can't have trouble reading this.
Yeah, sometimes it's cruel to show that stuff. But what are the chances then that in 2 years' time he can be the front man of an energetic campaign for re-election and then serve another 4 years?
Well, I would imagine it's very unlikely. Now, look, we're going to have more conversations like this. Life expectancy increasing, so that question of when he's too old. And he doesn't have what remember, this really came up when Reagan was running. He was 73 running for re-election, but he's still so sharp. His line to Walter Mondale when Reagan's age was raised, he says, I'm not going to politicise age. I'm not going to bring in my opponent's youth and inexperience.
Exactly.
And straight away, he put down any detractor. But Biden doesn't have that edge. Look, I think they'll do all his best to try and get him over the line in the hope that the VP can replace him next term.
Whoa, that's a scary thought. I think
that's the Democrat strategy.
Thanks for joining us, Tanveer.
Pleasure.
Interesting theory.